Hello, my friends. Today I invite you into a story that feels almost unreal, the story of Cleopatra, the last queen of ancient Egypt. But this is not just history. This is a journey back in time, a world of golden palaces, political games, and dangerous alliances where power is fragile and nothing is ever certain. And at the center of it all stands a woman whose intelligence and ambition shaped the fate of empires. Cleopatra was not just a queen. She was a strategist, a woman who understood power and how to hold it. And as we move deeper into her story, you'll begin to realize something important. This isn't only about the past. It's also about how you learn, how you absorb language, how you begin to think in English. Because as you listen, you naturally learn English through storytelling, without pressure, without memorizing, just understanding. So imagine this: the Nile, flowing quietly under the burning sun, the tension inside the royal palace, enemies rising, allies shifting, and Cleopatra calm, calculated, unstoppable. This is the moment where everything begins to change. Her life is filled with drama, power, love, betrayal, and ambition. The kind of story that doesn't just entertain, it stays with you, and as you listen closely, something else is happening. You are not just enjoying the story, you are improving your English listening practice, absorbing rhythm, pronunciation, and meaning naturally. So sit back, relax, and let this story pull you in. Because by the end, you won't just remember Cleopatra, you'll feel like you lived her story. And this is the true power of English stories for learning English. They don't just teach you, they transform the way you understand. Chapter 1. Cleopatra's Early Life. Hello, my friends. Today we travel back more than 2,000 years to a time of empires, power, and destiny. In the Elathim city of Alexandria, in ancient Egypt, a baby girl was born. Her name was Cleopatra VII. No one knew it yet, but she would become one of the most powerful women in history. But before the crown, before the legend, she was just a little girl with big dreams. Cleopatra was born into a royal family known as the Ptolemaic dynasty. They ruled Egypt, but they were not originally Egyptian. They came from Greece. Her ancestor, Ptolemy I Soter, was a general of Alexander the Great. After Alexander's death, he took control of Egypt and became its king. So Cleopatra grew up between two worlds, Greek heritage and Egyptian power. Her father, Ptolemy XII Auletes, was the ruler of Egypt. Her mother remains a mystery, even today. Inside the palace, Cleopatra's life seemed perfect. Luxury, beautiful clothes, servants everywhere, and the finest education. But behind the beauty, there was danger. In royal families, power is never safe. Brothers fought sisters, allies became enemies, and sometimes family killed family just to become king or queen. From a very young age, Cleopatra understood something important: knowledge is power. While most women in her time were not educated, Cleopatra was different. She studied deeply. Languages became her strength: Greek, Latin, Egyptian, Hebrew. It is said she could speak at least 7 languages fluently. This made her rare, but she didn't stop there. She explored science, mathematics, literature, and politics. She didn't want to be just a queen who wore a crown. She wanted to be a ruler who understood everything. And then there was her presence. Cleopatra was confident. Her voice was said to be powerful, almost magical. Not just beautiful, but unforgettable. Yet, her life was not easy. Her father was not a strong ruler. Many people in Egypt did not trust him. Some even hated him. There were rebellions, conflicts, and constant fear. Sometimes the royal family had to leave Egypt just to survive. Cleopatra learned early, to rule is to face enemies. Then, everything changed. At just 14 years old, her mother disappeared. No one knew the truth. Was it death or something darker? Soon after, her father became very sick. And suddenly, Cleopatra stood closer to the throne than ever before. She was still young, but she was already preparing to become queen. What made Cleopatra different was her connection to Egypt. Even though she came from a Greek family, she respected Egyptian traditions. She learned the Egyptian language, the first ruler of her dynasty to do so. And she presented herself as Isis, a symbol of power, wisdom, and divine authority. This was not just belief. It was strategy. By the time Cleopatra became a young woman, she was ready. Ready to rule. Ready to fight. Ready to survive. Because Egypt was not a peaceful kingdom. Enemies were everywhere. And to win, she would need more than intelligence. She would need courage and control. And this is where her rise begins. Now listen carefully, because this is more than just a story. It's a powerful way to learn English through storytelling, naturally, effortlessly, without pressure. As you follow each word, each pause, each emotion, you are improving your English listening practice, absorbing rhythm, pronunciation, and meaning without even trying. And this is the power of English stories for learning English. They don't just teach you, they stay with you. This is only chapter 1, and the real story is just beginning. Chapter 2. Cleopatra becomes queen. Cleopatra was no ordinary young woman. From the moment she was born, her destiny was to rule. But becoming queen was not easy. It was a path full of danger, betrayal, and clever plans. Let me tell you how Cleopatra became the queen of Egypt. When Cleopatra was 18 years old, her father, King Ptolemy XII, passed away. In his will, he declared that Cleopatra would rule Egypt, but not alone. She had to share the throne with her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, who was only 10 years old. Yes, in ancient Egypt, it was common for siblings to rule together, even if they were very young. But Cleopatra didn't want to share her power. She believed she was more capable and smarter than her brother. She had studied languages, history, and politics, while her brother was just a child with no experience. Cleopatra knew she had to take control if she wanted to protect Egypt and rule it the way it deserved. At first, Cleopatra tried to work with her brother, but soon their advisors started plotting against her. The advisors didn't like the idea of a strong, intelligent woman ruling Egypt. They wanted Ptolemy XIII to have all the power because he was easier to control. Cleopatra's life quickly became very dangerous. She was forced to leave the royal palace and flee to the desert. Imagine this: Cleopatra, the rightful queen, wandering in the hot, dry desert with only a few loyal followers. She had no home, no army, and no throne. But Cleopatra was not the kind of woman who gave up. While she was in exile, Cleopatra began to make a plan. She knew she couldn't take back her throne alone. She needed help, and she had to think fast. Luckily, at this time, a powerful Roman general named Julius Caesar arrived in Egypt. Caesar was one of the most famous and influential men in the world. And Cleopatra saw an opportunity. Cleopatra decided to meet Caesar. But she knew she had to do something dramatic to grab his attention. She couldn't just walk into the palace because her enemies would stop her. So she came up with a bold and clever idea. One night, Cleopatra had her loyal servant wrap her in a large carpet. Yes, a carpet. Then the servant carried the carpet into Caesar's quarters as a gift. When the carpet was unrolled, Cleopatra appeared, looking stunning and full of confidence. Imagine Caesar's surprise when this beautiful, intelligent young woman emerged from the carpet. Cleopatra spoke to Caesar with charm and intelligence. She told him about her struggles, her love for Egypt, and her dreams of becoming a great queen. Caesar was impressed. He saw that Cleopatra was not just beautiful, she was also brilliant and ambitious. Caesar agreed to help Cleopatra regain her throne. Together, they planned a way to defeat Ptolemy XIII and his advisors. Cleopatra's enemies didn't stand a chance against the combined forces of Cleopatra and Caesar. After a fierce battle, Ptolemy XIII was defeated, and Cleopatra was restored as the Queen of Egypt. But Cleopatra wasn't just satisfied with regaining her throne. She wanted Egypt to become powerful and respected again. She started working closely with Caesar to strengthen her country. She introduced new policies, improved trade, and built a strong relationship between Egypt and Rome. Chapter 3: Cleopatra and Julius Caesar. Cleopatra was now the Queen of Egypt. But her life was far from peaceful. She had won her throne with the help of Julius Caesar, one of the most powerful men in Rome. But their story was not just about politics. It was also about love, ambition, and danger. After Cleopatra defeated her brother, Ptolemy XIII, with Caesar's help, she became the most powerful person in Egypt. But she didn't want to just rule Egypt. She wanted to make her country strong and respected across the world. She knew that having Caesar by her side could help her achieve her dreams. Cleopatra and Caesar spent a lot of time together after the battle. Cleopatra admired Caesar's strength, his intelligence, and his ability to lead armies. Caesar admired Cleopatra's beauty, her charm, and her clever mind. Even though Caesar was much older, he was around 52 years old, while Cleopatra was only 21. Their connection was strong. Cleopatra invited Caesar to stay in Egypt, and he agreed. Together, they explored the beautiful city of Alexandria, sailed along the Nile River, and talked about their plans for the future. Cleopatra showed Caesar the rich culture and history of Egypt. And Caesar was impressed. He saw that Egypt was not just a land of deserts and pyramids. It was a powerful and wealthy country with great potential. During this time, Cleopatra became pregnant. In 47 BCE, she gave birth to a son whom she named Ptolemy Caesar. But people called him Caesarion, which means Little Caesar. Cleopatra believed that Caesarion would one day unite Egypt and Rome, creating a powerful empire. She wanted her son to be a symbol of strength and unity. But their happiness didn't last long. Cleopatra and Caesar's relationship caused many problems. Many people in Rome did not like the idea of Caesar being so close to a foreign queen. They believed Cleopatra was trying to control Rome through Caesar. Some even called her a dangerous temptress. Caesar decided to return to Rome. But he did not leave Cleopatra behind. Instead, he invited her to come with him. Cleopatra, always bold, always fearless, agreed. She traveled to Rome with Caesarion and a grand entourage. Imagine the scene: Cleopatra arriving in Rome with golden chariots, exotic animals, and beautiful Egyptian servants. She wanted to show the Romans the wealth and power of Egypt. In Rome, Cleopatra lived in a luxurious villa provided by Caesar. She attended banquets, met important Roman leaders, and even influenced Roman fashion with her Egyptian style. But not everyone welcomed her. Roman women were especially unhappy because Cleopatra was different. She was confident, glamorous, and unafraid to stand out. While in Rome, Cleopatra witnessed Caesar's rise to power. He declared himself dictator for life, meaning he had complete control over Rome. Cleopatra hoped this would strengthen their alliance. But trouble was already growing. Many Roman senators were unhappy with Caesar's power, and they began to plot against him. Then, in 44 BCE, something terrible happened. Julius Caesar was assassinated. A group of senators stabbed him in the Roman Senate because they feared he was becoming too powerful. His death shocked the world. Cleopatra was devastated. She had lost her greatest ally and the father of her son. And now she was in danger. Without Caesar, she had no protection in Rome. Many people saw her as a threat. She had to act quickly. Cleopatra gathered her servants, her son, and all her treasures, and fled back to Egypt. Back in Egypt, Cleopatra was determined to stay strong. She mourned Caesar's death, but she did not let it break her. She continued to rule Egypt with wisdom and courage. She strengthened her army, improved the economy, and prepared for whatever challenges would come next. Cleopatra also protected her son, Caesarion. She wanted him to grow into a strong leader, a ruler who could one day fulfill her dream of uniting Egypt and Rome. She taught him about politics, strategy, and responsibility. But Cleopatra knew Egypt was still in danger. Rome was the most powerful empire in the world, and Egypt needed a strong ally. Cleopatra began to search for new ways to protect her country and her throne. This chapter of her life was filled with love, loss, and survival. She had faced one of the greatest tragedies of her life, but she refused to give up. Chapter 4. Cleopatra and Mark Antony. Cleopatra's life took another dramatic turn after the death of Julius Caesar. This chapter is about her meeting with Mark Antony, one of the most powerful leaders in Rome, and how their story became one of the most famous love stories in history. After Caesar's death, Rome fell into chaos. Powerful men fought for control of the empire. Among them were Mark Antony, Octavian, Caesar's adopted son, and Lepidus. Together, they formed the Second Triumvirate to rule Rome. But behind the alliance, there was mistrust. Mark Antony was a brave soldier, a skilled leader, strong, handsome, and confident. He was also charming, a man people admired. Antony had heard of Cleopatra, the beautiful, intelligent queen of Egypt. But they had never met. At this time, Antony needed Egypt. It was rich, powerful, and important. And Cleopatra needed protection. Rome's power was growing. She knew an alliance with Antony could protect her kingdom. Then, one day, a message arrived. Antony wanted Cleopatra to meet him in Tarsus, a city far from Egypt, to discuss their alliance. Cleopatra understood. This was her moment. And she planned something unforgettable. When Cleopatra arrived in Tarsus, she did not come as an ordinary queen. She made an entrance that no one would ever forget. She sailed on a golden ship with silver oars and purple sails. She dressed as the goddess Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. Around her were servants dressed as gods and goddesses. The air was filled with perfume and the scent of flowers. And when Antony saw her, he was stunned. He had never seen anything like her. She was confident, intelligent, and captivating. Cleopatra spoke with charm and wit. And Antony could not look away. That moment was the beginning of something powerful, a relationship filled with passion and ambition. Cleopatra invited Antony to Egypt, and he accepted. In Alexandria, they spent time together, surrounded by luxury, lavish banquets, grand celebrations, and endless nights of conversation. Cleopatra showed him the beauty of Egypt, its culture, its history, its power. They laughed together, shared stories, and dreamed of the future. Antony fell deeply in love with Cleopatra, and Cleopatra fell in love with him. Together, they imagined an empire one that could unite Rome and Egypt. But their bond was not only love, it was also strategy. Antony needed Cleopatra's wealth and resources to support his armies. Cleopatra needed Antony's power to protect her throne. Together, they were stronger. Their relationship grew deeper, and they had 3 children. A son, Alexander Helios. A daughter, Cleopatra Selene. And another son, Ptolemy Philadelphus. Cleopatra loved her family. She believed her children would one day rule a great empire. But not everyone was happy. In Rome, many people were angry, especially Octavian. He saw Cleopatra as a threat. He accused her of trying to control Rome. Rumors began to spread that Cleopatra had bewitched Antony with her beauty and her charm. But there was more. Antony was already married. His wife was Octavia, Octavian's sister. Yet he chose Cleopatra, and that choice changed everything. Tension grew between Antony and Octavian, and soon it turned into something far more dangerous. War. Octavian declared Cleopatra and Antony enemies of Rome. Armies were prepared. The world held its breath, and Cleopatra and Antony stood together, knowing that everything they had built was now at risk. Chapter 5. The Fall of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. Cleopatra and Mark Antony were ready to fight for their love, their dreams, and their kingdoms. They stood together as a powerful couple determined to protect everything they had built. But their final chapter was filled with betrayal, heartbreak, and courage that would inspire people for centuries. Octavian, their greatest enemy, was determined to destroy them. He wanted control of Egypt and to stop Antony from gaining more power. Octavian's army was strong, disciplined, and well prepared. But Cleopatra and Antony were not ready to give up. They chose to fight. A great naval battle, known as the Battle of Actium. It took place in 31 BCE near the coast of Greece. Cleopatra brought her fleet of Egyptian ships. Antony brought his Roman forces. Together, they believed they could win. The day of the battle arrived. The sea was filled with ships, soldiers, and weapons. Cleopatra and Antony fought bravely, but Octavian's forces were stronger. Then, something unexpected happened. Cleopatra's ship turned and sailed away. Some believed she was retreating to protect her fleet and herself. But Antony misunderstood. He thought she had betrayed him. Heartbroken and confused, his forces began to fall apart. Octavian's army defeated them, and Antony was left devastated. He returned to Egypt, searching for answers. When they met, Cleopatra explained everything. She told him she had not betrayed him. She only wanted to save their lives, and Antony believed her. Their love remained strong, but time was running out. Octavian's army was coming closer They tried to defend Alexandria, but they were outnumbered. They knew they could not win. Still, they chose to stay together until the end. Antony fought one last battle, but his army was defeated. Believing Cleopatra was dead, Antony fell on his sword. As he lay dying, news came. Cleopatra was alive. His servants carried him to her, and in that moment, the two lovers met one last time. Antony died in Cleopatra's arms, and she was left alone. Cleopatra knew Octavian would soon capture her. She refused to be taken as a prisoner. She refused to be paraded through Rome as a defeated queen. Cleopatra was a woman of pride and dignity. She chose to control her fate. In her final moments, she dressed in her royal robes and crown. She surrounded herself with symbols of her power, and according to legend, she brought a poisonous snake, an asp. She allowed it to bite her, ending her life on her own terms. When Octavian arrived, he found Cleopatra lying still in her royal chamber. He was shocked, and yet he admired her courage. With her death, an era ended. The kingdom of Egypt came to an end. Octavian took control, and Egypt became part of the Roman Empire. But Cleopatra's story did not end there. Her life and her love with Antony became legendary. People remembered her for her intelligence, her bravery, and her determination. She was not just a queen. She became a symbol of strength, resilience, and courage. Her story teaches us that even in the face of great challenges, we can stand strong. We can fight for what we believe in. Cleopatra never gave up on her dreams or her country. She showed the world that women can be powerful leaders, thinkers, and warriors. Her life ended in tragedy, but her legacy lives on. Cleopatra reminds us to believe in ourselves, to take control of our destiny, and to never give up. Even in the darkest moments, we can face our fears with courage and dignity. So, my friends, let her story inspire you. Be strong, dream big, and never let fear stop you. Her life was filled with struggle, but also with love, hope, and greatness. Be like Cleopatra, bold, fearless, and unforgettable. What do you think of this incredible journey? Isn't Cleopatra's story one of the most inspiring in history? Let it remind you, no matter how hard life gets, you have the power to rise above it.